This is Podco Media Networks.
Hi there, Glocal Citizens. For the next two-part interview, I visit with Nana Amoako-Anin, founder and owner of Bliss Yoga Accra and the Bliss Wellness Center. We're at her lovely home in Accra, Ghana. In part one, Nana tells us about her transition from New York City powerhouse attorney to Accra-based wellness ambassador and market maker. In part two, we pick up the conversation with an introduction to the newest offering in Nana's Bliss portfolio, the Bliss Wellness Center. We also learn more about how her work with children is tackling the unspoken traumas inherent in the global child trafficking crisis. I'm here with a wonderful, dynamic entrepreneur, and she's based here in Accra, where we are. Her name is Nana Amoako-Anin, and she is the founder of Bliss Yoga Accra. Nana's had over 20 years of experience on the mat. Her business is booming, and she's also now moving into the life coaching space. I will leave my introduction there and hand it off to you, Nana. Tell us more about yourself.
Wow, Florence, that was a lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be on, and to all the listeners, how are you guys doing? That's a big question. A lot of people kind of identify that question of, tell me about yourself. I probably want to tell you a few interesting, maybe inspirational things about myself and my journey to Ghana. I'm originally from Ghana, and I grew up in the US, and my parents are retired diplomats, and I've traveled pretty much all over the world. I ended up in Accra as a young mother who relocated after a stint working as a lawyer, as a prosecutor in Manhattan, and also as a banker. There's an interesting call to duty for me. I think I had a pretty simple, strategic lifestyle. Always knew I wanted to practice law, had worked as a teacher in New York City as a public school teacher, art teacher after graduating from Columbia University, but had found that my health score was low, that I was working too many hours, I was experiencing too many traumatic events in the work I was doing, representing some of my victims. And so yoga became a really great part of my life, and I think you guys heard, the viewers or listeners heard about Bliss Yoga Accra. I licensed to be a yoga teacher in New York City, and then decided that my husband and I would leave America, which is a big move as a business person, and come back to Ghana, where he also was originally from. So we relocated about 7 years ago to Ghana, and did some lawyering in town when I arrived, did some good work with people, but decided that the lifestyle was a bit too rigid. And there's some freedom in being in Ghana, there's some freedom of being global. So with a license to teach yoga, I decided to teach yoga, but then accidentally became a studio owner and a business owner, because people seemed to need this practice more than just an individual teacher. So that's kind of the opening up for the conversation, just gives people some background about who I am.
Great, thanks for that. So you've given us a little bit of background, you've given us a little bit about your inspiration, just a little bit, but why don't you go a little bit deeper into that? Tell us a little bit more about the inspiration and a little bit more about why the where. So of course, you're both, it's kind of obvious because you and your husband are both from Ghana, and you chose Accra, but you could have chosen Kumasi, you could have chosen any part of Ghana potentially. So tell us more about why the where and what inspired you.
Sure. We were living in the city. We both knew that New York was a great place to live. We had a lovely apartment in Park Slope. We had created that kind of American dream story. However, at the time, the market started to change in New York and Wall Street generally, and we were both completely comfortable and fine in our jobs. But we realized something, that are we going to continue living this way, just kind of waiting for the end of the month, wondering whether our job would be there in 2 years? The constant stress of performance because of the market. Many young professionals experience this their whole life. But we realized something, that was creating a lot of stress. And so forward thinking, the inspiration was, how can we create a lifestyle where we maybe even own our own home, meaning that we have a home that's not, we're paying, for most of our lives on the earth, and we have some financial freedoms. And also we live in a city, because we were both living in New York, and we wanted to be in a cosmopolitan environment. So coming back to Ghana, yes, husband's family is from Kumasi. My father has some roots in Kumasi. there are other cities, but Accra just seemed to be a really interesting, exciting, and 7 years ago, a lot of people were moving.
Right.
The market had changed and there was a lot of this push and many people came and left, but people were talking about it. So we were very inspired to say like, well, our peers are talking about it and a few have gone, so let's go. And so that's kind of the deeper pull. But lastly, a lot of the inspiration was likely for me that I got to a point where I was living in New York where I felt kind of empty. I worked this really fancy job. I had like a really, really sizable paycheck. But the people I went to see were kind of, their emotional consciousness was not there. As a yogi, somebody who was moonlighting, teaching at night, in another community that was really focused on wellness, I was working in a bank on Wall Street, and the banking industry doesn't really have a lot of softness. So I found that my life was quite dry. And I just then had a child. And when you have a child, your maternal instincts also start thinking about what environment are you creating for your child, what environment are you creating for your family. So that's where the inspiration was like, this is dry, there's not really a lot of life here. How do we create some light? So Ghana was exciting, it was fresh, it was tropical, it was warm. We left the New York shores, the heat. We got off the plane and my daughter said, do I have to wear a jacket? I said, never again. You don't really have to do that. So that's where we came to. We were adventurous and we wanted something lively. We wanted warmth, we wanted heat. We wanted, life capacity. We wanted prana, which basically means lifeblood. We wanted that, and that was the inspiration.
Nice. So now we go into my Glocal Speak question. So this is where I ask my guests, what phrase, word, or saying is a meaningful part of your local experience, and how have you come to value that Glocal Speak?
Yeah, I was reading about this potential question, and I thought to myself, it's such a powerful one. I have so many ways of thinking about like quotes maybe or inspiration. And so I'll just say to you, for me being in Ghana, for me leaving, I'll still remember when I was leaving my firm that I worked in New York, and one of these beautiful, she's Guyanese women who worked at the firm for like 35 years, had the same home in the Bronx, had raised her children through the same job. I sat down with her at lunch. She was much older than me, and she said, so you're leaving America to move to Ghana to start over again at this level of your life? And I said, you know what? Yes, I am. But the words that I continue to use as I moved, when I put in my resignation or when I got on the plane, was surrender. That you have to be able to be global, to go over, you need to be able to surrender the idea that there's something fresh ahead of you, there's something unknown ahead of you. And living in a developing industry, your lifestyle is about surrendering every day.
Sure.
So in order to be sane and balanced and removed from the regrets of, oh, I left this, this. We generally as people tend to compartmentalize where we are or the goals we've made or what our set of life is. But to live in a new country, to relocate internationally, to anybody who's listening, that's probably who's experienced this, you have to surrender. So we got here on day one, we had to start from scratch.
Sure.
We had to get to know the terrain. We had to understand our daily moves. So surrender is a very simple word.
Yeah.
But it speaks volumes for living in West Africa.
Okay. Okay. Surrender. Thank you for surrendering some time for us today. Okay, so let's get a little bit deeper into your work. You have this wonderful, beautiful studio. I love it. I am a student of yoga at Bliss Yoga Accra, and you have grown that into something that is kind of becoming an institution here in Accra. So tell us more about the work, what exactly you do, what you're looking at, like trends, things like that.
Yes, that's a great conversation, and I'm actually part of a research study recently that's been launched in South Africa about yoga in Africa. Oh. That's a whole other conversation that we continue to bloom into. But yes, so Bliss Yoga Accra is a 7-year-old yoga studio that was opened generally to the public in a luxury hotel in Ghana, a marketplace that was helpful to us to do, and people make choices when you open businesses like that about being in a market that is about tourism. So we are a tourist business. Yoga is a tourism, in that tourism market. And so we did open in that environment and invested to start our brand there. We started very small. I still remember the first day of classes. We were fitting out the unit and a couple people came and signed a book. I still have the book. 3 students from the American Embassy. When are you opening? So a gentleman from down the hall. When are you opening? I had 5 names in my notebook. I was like, great. And it was a 10 a.m. class on Saturday. That was it. And they started coming. There were just 5 of them, and then maybe 6 of them. And then we were excited that we had 1 yoga class, you know. And eventually, after maybe 2 months, we had 15 people in a room that could only fit 12. Mm-hmm. And the hotel started to notice that we were turning people away, and we then had to build a website because we didn't have one. We had a small landing page. And then the hotel gave us this giant unit, and our classes became like 40 people on Saturdays at 10 a.m. because it was the only really affirmative yoga class or space in Accra generally that was consistent. So then we realized that, and we is really I, because as a business owner in this market, you start alone. Then I met a teacher who was also trying to get herself ready because she just licensed in Belgium. And we started another class. And so after 2 or 3 years, we had like 3 classes on our studio schedule. And we started with 25 students to 50, and then by year 6, we had like 800 people in our database. And by year 7, we were pushing about 1,000 people in 3 months coming into the studio in Osu, where we just moved. So eventually we had to kind of back into the business. And so if we're talking about business talk, you start something small, but then it gets bigger, and then you have to learn to go back to set up. So all the things start to ramp up, our accounting systems and our communication protocols and managing people and customer service and training staff on what customer service is, and also on thinking about the therapeutic environment. How do you manage a community that you're doing business for, offering a service for, they're paying for service, but they're also sometimes have emotional needs that you have to make sure you're catering to. So you're not just having people buying salad. They're coming with an emotional story, and some of it's related to transitions or trauma or separations, so you have to make sure that your staff is in tune with the market that you're presenting to. So the business was an accidental moment. It was meant to be a space of a few cubic meters that would cater to private students, one-on-ones from my personal self, that would allow me to cater to my lifestyle, that I could be present for my daughter. That became an accidental moment because you don't turn people away when they start coming. You're a service provider, somebody who's worked with people to assist and coach throughout my life. I said, well, I don't want to close because it's too big. I need to make it bigger. So after like 6 months, we expanded, and I rented another unit and took another leap of faith. And then the market happened. Ghana and Africa is now newer, but now welcomed yoga. So now people all over Accra, from somebody who's born here, who went to school here, to somebody who's relocated from Singapore to do business at an NGO, are all coming to the same environment. And we've noticed that now the wellness conversation is everywhere, and we feel credited that we've been able to be part of that. We've been able to send some of our ambassadors out to the market. So now there's other outreaches. There's organic farming. There's many, many farmers markets. There's yoga in hotels. There's yoga in restaurants. There's yoga in clothing stores. The big storyline to this, as I kind of close this portion of the talk, is you start small, and then in developing markets, you work backward. So we learned a lot. Learning curve was high because the business wasn't ever meant to be. And we came in and we made it meant to be.
When I look at a few of the things that you haven't mentioned about your business is that you've adapted your model very well. So number one, you mentioned, okay, I was the only teacher, and then I met a woman who was just newly licensed, then I had another teacher. But the elephant in the room is, where do you get teachers? You know, this is a developing market here, so you're, maybe scratching for, people who decide to relocate as well, but then you innovated and did something really
we started launched a teacher training program because we felt that. And so truly, you're right. As a business, you have to also think about the longevity and sustainability of your business. And in any Fortune 500 company, the Robin Sharmas of the world, who's an executive coach and coaches Fortune 500s a lot, who has his own business, he always talks about this concept that you have to make sure that you're not the only one. And that's also where ego comes out of that you have to be able, as a businesswoman or man, know that you should not be the business.
Right.
You were the only one that, oh, Nana or Florence, I'm just going to see her. Your business will never survive a 10-year span. So when I got in, also teaching yoga is very tiring.
Right.
And so, the first year to be able to become a yoga school, I had to teach 1,000 hours of teaching.
Oh, wow.
Teach 1,000 hours to be able to open the yoga school. And so I taught hundreds of classes.
Wow.
I pretty much built the studio myself.
Sure.
Because students were coming to me on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays and Sundays, and it was all public classes. And I had one teacher who would shadow me because she was just getting in. But in order to be able to license to be a yoga school, I had to do that. But eventually, after that year or two of being stretched physically, I realized that it's not about me, and it became about me, that I needed to get other people out there. So we started a license with Yoga Alliance after some time when they gave us accreditation, and became a yoga school and started teaching people to become teachers. And from that, we've been able to, in 7 years, we've trained 73 people.
Nice.
And licensed them. And so those licenses, some have left the country, others have gone off and opened their own studios. And then many have been so excited about what we do. So they've come on and become part of the business.
Right.
And that's the sustainability portion.
Right. And I think that that's a key thing to recognize and understand in emerging markets like this, is that we have a responsibility to build capacity, because unfortunately there's just not always there, especially with the new and innovative products or services. So kudos on that. That's awesome. Another thing that I kind of observed about how now you're moving more into the wellness, and I feel like this was a great catalyst for that, is we took a very special trip now, about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, yes. You organized a retreat. We went to Goa in India. We had an amazing, it was life-changing for me. So that's definitely, and so how did that change your business? And or is that a big catalyst for where you're moving now? Because I'm seeing that in a lot of how I've changed and the things that I'm gravitating towards as well.
Very good question. Those big trips, I always call that my India. I'm sure you might say that as well. My India. It's all over my house. It's in my everyday. I still picture the routines that we had together. Yes, it truly has changed. I still remember that trip when we arrived. There were about 6 of us, or 7 of us, including myself. And the host of the retreat saw me in my excitement and tiredness of being a host of a trip. And she sat me down and said to me, the next time you come, come alone. So it's about you. And you need more people. You need more support. When you go home, from the visual first Ayurvedic profile of myself in the doctor's office, and he said, you are drained. You need, as a business, you need to continue to push for more people, more assistance, so that you can step away and that this can become something you love again. So I think at the point of India, we were just, again, grappling with the developing market and still having to be, so the trip was a hosting event that really made me see that self-care had to come back. So on India, we were doing our own yoga. We were students again, all of us.
Right.
So I got back to the US for a bit and then back to Ghana. I realized that I needed to step even further out. So what happened was the teachers became more present. And eventually, after now in year 7, I'm not even teaching on the calendar. You can't find me on the calendar. I don't have a class on the calendar.
Right. That's right.
And the concept of that people, I come to my studio and people don't know who I am. They're like, oh, are you taking classes today? I'm like, yeah, I'm just here to visit. And it makes good sense.
Sure.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so India, and for most of the listeners who do a retreat or a trip away, sometimes it makes you think about, like, how do you sit? Like, what do you need? Yeah. And so my India was a way to come back and say, how can I function and still be alive in this business in 10 years? And that's it. It's stepping away and being behind the scene, and also watching the development of other people. Right. You see?
Thanks for joining us for part 1 of our discussion with Nana Amoako-Anin. Be sure to join us again next week for more thoughtful business and global lifestyle insights.